Hey everyone. So today I just wanted to try to do, as quickly as possible anyway, a video to show off some of the stuff I got for the holidays, whether it be things I received as gifts or things I got for myself. And I suppose to start, I really ought to mention the camera I'm using, which is the Panasonic DMC Lumix FZ200. A little bit of a mouthful there, but it's a pretty good camera. And I got it in order to replace the old Canon digital camera that I was using, the 210 IS PowerShot. And that was a pretty decent camera, but then I encountered some issues with some dust behind the lens of that camera. And I'll explain in a minute why I'm even bringing that up. But basically, because of that dust issue, the camera is more or less unusable to me, except in only very certain conditions for certain things. But at any rate, I'm quite happy with this one. It's got the, among other features, the flip-out LCD screen, which is great, and helping me right now photograph things, or video things here. Because when you set up a thing like this, and you have a camera that has a fixed LCD in the back, you know, it's almost impossible to figure out if things are in the right shot or whatever. It's this whole process of back and forth, and so one of the things I knew I really wanted in a new camera was the flip-out screen, and it may not seem like the biggest thing in the world, but it really helps, at least when doing things like this. But in addition to that, I also picked up this Sunpack 2-in-1 lens filter set. And what's nice about this camera is that it does allow for screw-on lens filters. Now, I don't really require the one here for the polarization thing. You know, they're basically like a piece of sunglasses glass to put in front of your lens to help equalize your lights and your darks. That's not what I got this for. What I got it for was just the plain old UV filter, as close to a clear, featureless glass filter as I could find. And the purpose for that is simply lens insurance. Because after the issue with my Canon, I've become a lot more lens conscious, and I would figure that it's better to risk ruining a $20 piece of glass screwed to the front of this camera as opposed to accidentally ruining the much more expensive piece of glass of the camera itself. And so definitely it's a worthy investment. And it's something I probably should have gotten sooner than I did, but at least I have it now, and it'll certainly pay off, I'm sure. But anyway, with that out of the way, I suppose we can move on to some of the other things. First, a sort of simple, stupid little thing. I got the world-famous Slinky. And there's kind of a story behind this. A while back, I was at the grocery store and I had a $1 off coupon for some item, I can't remember. And then I remembered in the dollar section of the store, they had the little baby mini Slinky. And I wanted to try it out on the stairs, but it wouldn't work. It's too small. And there's not enough weight to really carry it over something as large as a stair. So, for the holidays, I got this as sort of a gag gift. And they're kind of fun to play around with. And, yeah. So I won't waste too much time with this, but if requested, I will devote an entire video in the future to nothing but hot Slinky on Slinky action. Yeah. Anyway, Moving on, we also have, let's see, what next? Well, a few things that I picked up from a store called American Science and Surplus. It's kind of a local shop that's very random and has some sort of science-themed stuff, some sort of junk-themed stuff, just a whole amalgam of weird, interesting things. But what I like to go there for is to find the odd, occasional modeling supplies, or makeshift modeling supplies, I should say. And one of them that's sort of proper would be a small set of these eyedropper thingies, which are great for not only siphoning paint, but mixing it and having, you know, equal amounts of distribution between certain paints. Like if your paint ratio calls for 75% paint to 25% thinner, or maybe one drop of this color to another one drop of another, well, now everything is standardized by the droppers, and even though they're not entirely reusable, they're dirt cheap, and I can get my hands on them easily. So I bought about 20 of them, in addition to all the others I have on hand, just to boost the stock and make sure I wouldn't run out. In addition to that, something of another modeling supply would be this large styrofoam circular block. And what's great about these is when you're airbrushing kits or spray painting any kits that you have, if you mount all of your parts onto the alligator clip skewer setup, you can stick those skewers into a styrofoam block like this and let them dry without having to hold them. And it wasn't something I really needed, but at $1.25 compared to what you would pay at like Walmart even for something comparable, this was a no-brainer. So if I need any spillover room for a larger project, or just want to separate colors or something like that, whatever it be, I'll have this handy to do whatever with I see fit. So that's pretty nice. Now, the last little bit of things from the store I was at, that Science and Surplus, are these small little set of rubberized dinosaur skulls. They were like, I don't know, 50 or 75 cents a piece, and they're surprisingly well detailed for being as small as they are and as mass-produced and junk quality plastic as they are. Like we have the Triceratops here, and you can sort of see the molded detail in there, if this would focus. Focus. There we go. It's a little better anyway. But yeah, I mean, they're pretty anatomically correct. They just look good. They're colored pretty decently. They basically look like tiny versions of what you'd see in a museum. So, obviously this is Triceratops, and we've got Brachiosaur, and we got a Parasaurolophus, the one with the big crest there. Then we've got some carnivores. We've got the Dilophosaurus, also known as the Spitter from Jurassic Park. Though in Jurassic Park they're actually made a lot smaller than they're supposed to be. The real ones were about 20 feet long. And then we've got Velociraptor. Again, there's sort of a size discrepancy in the movie. They're actually supposed to be a little smaller than they were. These are maybe only about 4 feet tall, as opposed to the 6 foot tall monsters you saw in the movie. And then, of course, T-Rex. And I don't know what exactly compelled me to buy these. I guess I just figured they look pretty good for being 75 cents a pop, and you know, maybe I'll display them somewhere. Might be kind of fun. So anyway, that was kind of cool. And then besides that, let's see, moving on. We have a few books here, and they're sort of carrying on a similar theme here. This one is entitled simply Dinosaur, and it is supposed to be based on a 4-part television series on A&E from probably the early 90s or late 80s. And why I picked this up, and by the way, I got this and the other books I'll show at a place called Half Price Books, and found some pretty good deals there, including this, for only $4.50. This book is not only kind of thick and goes over some interesting information about the whole field of paleontology and all that, but in addition, it also has a lot of really cool vintage classic dinosaur art. The type I would have seen in many of my childhood dinosaur specials. When I was young, I remembered seeing rather interesting art. And I'll sort of scroll through here a little bit and see if I can't find some that I remember. Here's another that's kind of cool. I remember seeing this one somewhere in maybe an old book of mine or something. But I love how vivid it is and how realistic they try to portray things. And it's something that it kind of sucks to say it, but in like the modern shows we have on like Discovery Channel or something, you kind of lose that realism quality, and they just sort of turn it into like special effects with the CG and all that. But in any event, you do get some pretty cool art in here, and I just figured it was, you know, my inner child speaking here, but this book was good enough just for the pictures. And I'll just find a couple more that were sort of exemplary here, the ones I really remembered from childhood. Here's one. This one I love, because I've seen this in a lot of really old books, but it may not be the most anatomically accurate depiction of these animals, but it's still got that real nostalgic feel to it, the sort of faded art look to it. Really cool stuff in here, and well, there's like a couple more that are kind of cool. Oh, and here's that skull of Parasaurolophus again, and let me see. I mean, it's not too far off the little toy that I got, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, I know there's a couple more. Here's one I really like. This I remember from one of my old shows. In fact, I just sort of rewatched it recently. You know, the harsh sunlight, the peeling skin, the shadows, just the realism of this. It almost looks like a photograph. So I was always really impressed by that one. And I'm sure there's like one or two more in here. Here we go. This one I love. Again, the light, the shadows, the dust being stirred up. I mean, it's very dynamic and it looks very real. And I don't know, there's just something about art like this that these newer shows that have been out in the last few years, they don't really seem to capture this mood, this feel. And that's a big part of what draws me in about the whole thing of dinosaurs. It's a big nostalgia kick. It's part of my childhood to relive, but it's also sort of an atmosphere and a thought and a feeling about what it sort of represented to me when I was younger and the impression it left on me. And pictures like this bring it all back. The newer shows, as good as they are, don't seem to do that so much for me. So this is a cool book to have even just for the pictures, but it might make for an interesting read as well. And one last little dinosaur related book would be this book entitled Digging Dinosaurs, written by John Horner. And what's interesting about this guy is that Michael Crichton used this man as an inspiration for the character in the book Jurassic Park. And this is slightly different than the character you would see in the movie, because obviously, you know, movies and books, there's always a big difference between the two. Though the movie did keep some things and some lines pretty accurate, but I digress. This book, more or less, catalogs this man's discoveries in the late 80s or so about a big nest of dinosaur eggs, which up until then were pretty much a rarity and not easy to find, and not much was known about the parental habits of dinosaurs and all that. And his discoveries during this expedition he was on uncovered a lot of this. So it's interesting to read about this new development in the field, but also just to get a more personal insight into the man that inspired the Alan Grant character, which Jurassic Park is one of my favorite books of Michael Crichton. And so this was a cool book to pick up, and it was only $4, so I couldn't really pass it up. And so then one last book, and then we'll get on to some other things, would be this David Attenborough's New Life Stories. I'm about halfway through it, but it's a pretty interesting read. And this sort of serves as a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of a, well, alternative to something I was looking for also. I was looking for the predecessor to this book, but also to find that in an audiobook format. I managed to find one on Amazon in a CD format, but I hadn't gotten a chance to really buy that myself. So when I walked into Half Price Books and saw this sitting there for only $10, and then they were having a sale which knocked the price down to around $8, I figured this was pretty much a steal and a nice alternative to what I was going for in the first place. And if you are not familiar with Mr. Attenborough, again, if you want to throw it back to Jurassic Park, if you know Richard Attenborough, the person who played John Hammond, the tycoon who built Jurassic Park, Richard Attenborough is David's brother. And David was mostly in the naturalist film field. He worked on a lot of different shows from, since the times of black and white television, let's just say. It's been a long road that he's been on, and it leads to a lot of different stories from his own life, and that's what makes a book like this so interesting. It not only ties things to the natural world, but also the guy himself is a pretty interesting character, so this was a cool book to pick up, and I'm looking forward to finishing it. And so yeah, that's a monkey. Anyway, that's all for the books then. And now we'll get on to some other things. First of all, we have a few paints. I've got 3 of these little jars of fluorescent blue enamel paint from Testors. Now these are cool because not only do they glow under black light, like this kind of paint does, this kind of fluorescent blue, but in addition, unlike this type of paint, this is adequate for airbrushing. And it's applicable for areas where this paint is just too weak and doesn't stick well enough. For little details and things, this like craft acrylic variety of paint, it works okay. But for enamel paints, those work better when you're airbrushing or covering larger areas or doing anything like that. So they are a little hard to come by, so I've slowly gotten 3 different jars of them, and I've got 2 solely dedicated to at least something I have in mind for an upcoming project, and then I have 1 at least set aside to mix with fluorescent yellow in the same variety so that I can have my own custom neon green. And I can mix it so that I either have a more predominantly blue-green or a more predominantly yellow-green, which is better than just relying on stock fluorescent green, which doesn't even glow that well anyway. So this is a little trick I picked up during the very beginning of my gunpla hobby, but I was using these paints when I found it out, so it was just sort of a color technique. And these colors are basically very, very similar from one another, from one paint type to another. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's this acrylic or if it's the enamel or what, but generally they all sort of glow and react the same phosphorescent chemicals and things like that are all inside the same colors, so there's nothing really to worry about in that regard. Moving on, we have a couple other colors here. Well, they're the same color, but they're 2 different tins. And this is the Humbrol Enamel Matte 31 color paint. Now this color I got specifically for my Master Grade EZ8, because if you look at the shield and you look at that little bar that's mounted to the top section of the shield, like if here's the arm and here's the shield, it's mounted right up in this area. That little bar is a different color than the internal frame of the EZ8, and in fact it represents the same color as the internal frame of the ground type Gundam, which has this sort of blue-green gray color to it. And this was a heck of a color to try to find and pin down, and I haven't, and this isn't even quite accurate, but it's close enough. And being enamel, of course, I can airbrush with this quite easily, so that in the event I do get a Master Grade ground type Gundam, I can use this color and have the extra tin available for me to have enough paint to do both my EZ8 here and the ground type Gundam. So this I'll be using in due time, and maybe be using again a little later. And we got 2 more paints here, something for a future project I will discuss later. But first of all, we have Tamiya Acrylic Gunmetal and Tamiya Acrylic Metallic Gray. Now, I'm not entirely sure if these will be appropriate for what I have in mind, but I like the colors that I saw in the store. In fact, that might be a good way to show it off. They're more or less the same, but one is a slightly different hue than the other. You can see it a little better from this angle. This is sort of more of a yellowish, and this is sort of more just the metallic gray color that, and this isn't truly representative of the gunmetal because it's It's just the metallic undercoat. But anyway, I have something in mind for these, and I don't know if it'll work. And I'll explain later what it is, but I figured I'd get them and try them out, and if I can't use them on the project I have in mind, maybe I can use it on something else. So, I got that. And moving on from this, one last little item before I'll have to end this part of the video, is this little jar for my airbrush. And this is, if I can get the wrapper here, the Posh, or Pache, however you pronounce it, airbrush jar. And what's nice about this is that because it has the adapter cap, I'm able to use now a second jar to switch between if I'm working on a project and I want to spray one color after the other without having to clean completely the one and only spray jar that came with my airbrush. Now I don't have to go through all that hassle immediately just so that I can spray another color. It takes a lot of time to do that. So it's good to have one of these on hand for being able to quickly switch between colors, and it'll definitely cut down on time in terms of finishing my paint jobs and getting it all done a lot quicker. So this wasn't too inexpensive, or too expensive. It was about $5, but it's a good investment anyway. So anyway then, yeah, like I said, I should probably end this video here. For whatever reason, because I'm recording at standard def and MP4 format, it only lets you do half-hour length videos. And I really didn't want it to go this long, but whatever. Anyway, I'll have to end it here, and then I'll have to come back with a part 2 to this to show off whatever remaining stuff I have. So I hope you'll look forward to that. And so then, until that time, catch you later.